An intense battle unfolds in a New York courtroom. A successful man seeks to take away his young son, believing that he can give him a better future, while a single mother will do anything to prevent this. He offers stability and security, she offers maternal love and devotion. Shocking arguments are heard in the case, dark family secrets are revealed, and the final verdict changes everyone's lives forever. Is the court's decision fair, and is there a real winner in this case? Chapter 1, Claim. The courtroom of the New York District Court was filled with a barely perceptible din. A man in a dark gray suit, with a serious expression on his face, looked intently at his watch. Robert Carter sat at the plaintiff's desk, his hands clenched into fists nervously. His lawyer, a tall man with strong-willed features, carefully whispered to him, "Relax, Robert. Everything will be fine. You have every reason to win." "I know," Carter replied, but the tension in his voice was obvious. In a few minutes, the bailiff announced the arrival of the judge. "Everyone get up. The court, in the name of the state of New York, declares the meeting open." Presiding Judge Alice Turner. A woman in her 50s walked into the hall and, wasting no time, settled into her chair. She had a determined face, a confident look, and a manner of speaking that brooked no objection. A slight silence hung in the hall until the judge unfolded the documents on the table. Carter v. Brooks pending. The plaintiff demands to determine the place of residence of the child with him. The defendant, the child's mother, Diana Brooks, denies the claim. "Am I correct, Mr. Carter?" Robert nodded quickly before answering. "Yes, Your Honor. I believe that my child cannot grow in the conditions in which he is now. I want to give him a future." The judge nodded and turned her gaze to the defendant's lawyer, briefly reviewing his documents. Diana Brooks was sitting on the other side of the room. Her face showed tension, but she didn't look broken. On the contrary, her dark brown eyes radiated a kind of quiet stubbornness. She clenched her fingers nervously, but tried not to show her excitement. "Miss Brooks," said the judge, "do you not agree with the lawsuit?" Diana cleared her throat and answered in an even, if slightly trembling voice. "Yes, Your Honor. I am categorically against it. This is my son, and I will not let him be taken away from me." Robert grimaced. He was not going to take away the child. He just wanted to give her a normal life. The child deserved better than the impoverished conditions in which he was forced to grow up. "Okay," Judge Turner made a note in her notebook. "We will listen to the arguments of both sides. I asked the plaintiff to provide arguments." Carter's lawyer stood up, looked around the room, and focused on the judge. "Your Honor, my client Robert Carter is a responsible and financially secure citizen who has every opportunity to raise his son. He is ready to give him stability, a good environment, and quality education. However, the place where the child lives now is extremely dangerous. We will prove it during the trial." The judge nodded and turned her gaze to the defendant's lawyer. "Is the defense ready to speak?" Diana's lawyer, a woman in a strict suit with long brown hair, stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. My client is a loving mother who dedicates her life to her son. She is raising him alone, without the support of the plaintiff, who appeared only after the paternity test. She has repeatedly proved that she can provide the child with everything she needs, and the alimony she now receives will allow her to improve her living conditions." Robert sighed heavily. This is just the beginning, but he was ready to fight. He knew that his son deserved better, and he was ready to prove it in any way he could. The judge looked at her watch and made a note in her notebook. "Good. Let's hear all the arguments in detail. The meeting will continue." The real battle for the child began. Chapter 2, Background of the Relationship. Robert Carter sat in the courtroom trying to hide his excitement. His lawyer stood up and moved closer to the table, preparing to speak. "Your Honor, before we get into the details of the current state of affairs, it is necessary to consider how it all began. After all, this story is not just about a legal dispute, it is the story of two people who met by chance, but found themselves connected forever." Judge Turner nodded. "Continue." Robert shifted slightly in his chair as he remembered the night in Detroit that changed his life. "It happened 3 years ago," he began. I work as an engineer, and then I went on a business trip to Detroit. The company provided me with accommodation in a local hotel. It was not the best area. Already on the first day, the locals warned me, "Don't walk here late at night." I didn't take those words very seriously, but eventually I realized that they were right. Robert paused, looking at Diana, who was looking at him with no emotion. One evening, after a long day at work, I went to a bar at the hotel. The atmosphere was heavy, tired. Everyone was drinking in silence, discussing their problems. I drank a little more than I should have. Then I met Diana. She worked as a maid in the same hotel. We talked. She was friendly, open. We laughed, joked. I can't say it was anything special, but after a few hours of talking, I suggested spending the evening together in my room. Diana pursed her lips, but did not interrupt. Judge Turner noted her reaction and nodded to the defense attorney. "Miss Brooks, do you agree with what the plaintiff said?" The woman slowly exhaled and answered, "In general, yes, but let me clarify. For me, it was not just a chance meeting. I sincerely believed that it could become something more. Robert was different, unlike the men I knew. He was polite, friendly. I thought he was interested in me as a person, not just a one-night stand." Robert grimaced but said nothing. "What happened next?" asked the judge. Diana looked down. "He left the next morning. I left my phone number. I didn't know if he wanted to see me again, but he invited me to visit. I didn't dare. Yes, my life was difficult then, but after a few months I realized that I was pregnant." "Did you immediately inform the plaintiff about this?" said Robert's lawyer. "No. At first I didn't know what to do, and when she decided to give birth, she called him." "And how did he react?" asked the judge. Diana closed her eyes. "He didn't believe it. I thought it was a scam. But I do not condemn him. He even came to Detroit to take a paternity test." Robert finally spoke. "Yes, I was shocked. I didn't expect this story to have a sequel, but the test confirmed that the child is mine, and I'm not going to abdicate responsibility." The judge looked through the documents and turned her gaze to Diana again. "Do you deny that at the beginning the plaintiff refused to recognize the child? He said he didn't need it, that I should take the money and forget about him," she said calmly. "But when the official test appeared, he changed his mind. The problem is that now he wants to take my son away from me. I just want to give him a better future," Robert insisted. Judge Turner tapped her pen on the table. "Good. The background is clear. Next, we will consider the living conditions of each of the parties. Let's continue the hearing." Chapter 3, Plaintiff's Evidence. Judge Alice Turner turned a page in her folder and looked up at the plaintiff's attorney. "Okay, let's move on to the evidence. Mr. Griffin, what argument does your client have?" Robert Carter's attorney, Richard Griffin, confidently stood up, straightened the lapels of his suit, and walked closer to the judge's table. "Your Honor, my client has strong evidence that the child's current living conditions are unacceptable. Allow me to present you with photo evidence and social services affidavits." Griffin took several pictures from the folder and handed them to the judge. The photo captured the house in which Diana Brooks lived, its yard, which looked more like a dump, and the abandoned streets of the area. These photos were taken last month by independent social workers. "Your Honor, the house where the defendant lives is in disrepair. The area in which it is located has one of the highest crime rates in Detroit. In police reports, the location is repeatedly mentioned in connection with armed attacks, drug trafficking, and even murders." The judge carefully examined the pictures. Her gaze became more focused. She looked at the documents that the lawyer had submitted and asked, "Miss Brooks, what can you say about this evidence?" Diana pursed her lips, her gaze clouding for a moment. "Your Honor, I do not deny that the district is difficult, but this does not mean that I am a bad mother. This does not mean that my son is in danger." Robert Carter spoke quietly but confidently. "Miss Brooks, we both know it's dangerous out there. You yourself admitted that you are afraid to let Michael out. As soon as he grows up, he will have to leave the house, and then what? Can you guarantee that he will not become a victim of street violence?" Diana was confused, but quickly recovered. You exaggerate. Not everyone who lives in such an area becomes a criminal. Griffin continued. We also have social services reports confirming that Miss Brooks' two older sons are currently serving time in prison for felonies. One of them is involved in the murder, and the other was arrested for aggravated assault. This is not true, Diana burst out. They are not guilty. They defended themselves. They were just unlucky. We don't question the circumstances of their crimes, Griffin answered calmly. But the fact remains, your older children are convicted criminals. And if little Michael grows up in the same environment that surrounded them, what is the chance that his fate will be different? Diana clenched her hands into fists, but said nothing. Judge Turner watched her closely. Go on, Mr. Griffin. The lawyer took a step forward and continued. In addition, there is a financial aspect. My client is a stable, well-off man. He works in a successful company, has his own apartment in New York, and can provide the child with all the opportunities for development. He is ready to provide Michael with quality education, health insurance, and everything necessary for a comfortable life. Miss Brooks currently earns minimum wage and only recently began receiving child support. She does not have a stable financial future. Robert raised his head and added firmly, I don't want to take my son away from his mother, but I can't let him grow up in danger. The child deserves better. Judge Turner tapped her pencil on the table. Good. The evidence is accepted. Now let's listen to the defendant. Miss Brooks, it's your turn to make your case. Chapter 4. Diana's Answer. Diana clenched her hands into fists, trying to hide her excitement. Her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to hold her head high. She felt that she was backed into a corner. All these photos, documents, accusations. They painted her life as if she was a loser who doomed her son to a future among criminals. But it was not true. She knew she could be a good mother. She will fight. Her attorney, Sarah Miller, stood up and nodded to her. It was a sign. It was time to speak. Your Honor, Diana began, looking directly at the judge. I do not deny that my life was difficult, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad mother. Judge Turner watched her intently without interrupting. Diana took a deep breath and continued. The plaintiff showed you a photo of my district. He called him dangerous, impoverished. And it's true, it's not the best place in the world. But you know what he didn't show? People who live here. Yes, there are problems in our area, but there are also families here, mothers who work nights to feed their children, children who go to school and dream of a better life. And my son will not be an exception. Attorney Griffin crossed his arms skeptically, but Diana continued, ignoring him. Robert says that my eldest son is in prison, but he did not tell me why. He was an athlete, he had medals and victories, and once he was just defending himself. Yes, he was convicted, but that doesn't make him a monster. Like my middle son, he wasn't a drug addict. His friends forced him to try something once, and that attempt turned fatal. I lost my son. Her voice trembled for a moment, but she quickly pulled herself together. You have no idea what it's like to hide a child, Your Honor. But I will not allow my son to be taken from my hands because of the mistakes of the past. She turned her gaze to Robert. He sat motionless, clenching his fingers. Obviously, he did not expect such an explosion of emotions. Robert says he wants to give my son a better future, that he can do more to him than I do. But tell me, who will be with little Michael at night when he cries? Who will hug him when he is scared? He who is constantly on business trips. His mother who never saw her grandson. His sister who doesn't even know that he likes to listen to bedtime stories. Diana sighed. I am the only person this child knows, and he must stay with me. Judge Turner tapped her pen on the table. Miss Brooks, you said you could change life circumstances. How exactly? I have already started doing it. I am receiving child support to help me move to a better area. I work, I don't drink, I don't use drugs, I don't lead an antisocial lifestyle. I have a stable income. And the city has already approved the resettlement program, and our house is subject to demolition. Lawyer Griffin grimaced. So it turns out that now the child lives in bad conditions, and you admit it. I admit that housing needs improvement. but I do not accept that my son is in danger. I am the only thing he knows, and it is not the place that makes the house, but the people who live there. The judge made a mark in the notebook. Good. I heard your arguments. Now let's move on to the cross-examination. Chapter 5, Cross-Examination. The courtroom froze in tense silence. Judge Alice Turner looked from Diane Brooks to the plaintiff's attorney, anticipating the first question. Richard Griffin, Robert Carter's attorney, stood up and took a leisurely few steps toward the podium where Diana sat. Miss Brooks, he began in a calm, almost reassuring tone, you don't mind living in a high-crime area, do you? Diana clenched her hands, trying to remain composed. She already knew that this moment would come. Yes, my district is in trouble, she admitted, but that doesn't make me a bad mother. Griffin nodded as if in agreement and took another step forward. You said that now you have financial stability thanks to alimony, but up until this point, you were making minimum wage as a maid. Could you claim that you previously had sufficient resources to raise a child? Diana sighed as if expecting this question. I worked, I did not sit idly by. Yes, it was difficult, but we managed. Did you manage? Griffin repeated, letting the pause hang in the air. Do you think that surviving on the edge of poverty is a good enough life for your son? I did my best. Diana answered sharply. Not everyone gets the chance to live in expensive areas of New York, Mr. Griffin. Griffin remained unmoved. You say that the child is not in danger, but at the same time your eldest son is in prison. The middle one died of an overdose. Are you not afraid that Michael may repeat their fate? Diana's eyes lit up. It was a tragedy, she answered sharply, and I will do everything so that my youngest son does not follow the same path. But can you guarantee it? Pressed the lawyer. Can you swear that in 10 years he won't be in the same situation as his brothers? I will raise him differently. Her voice trembled, but she did not allow herself to break. I have experience, I know my mistakes, and I won't make them again. Griffin nodded, but he wasn't going to back down. Let's change the subject. You said you could move. Do you already have a specific agreement for a new home? Has the lease been signed? Diana blushed a little. No, but I am looking for options. I have money for the down payment. So it's just words for now, concluded the lawyer. The child lives where he lives, and at this moment nothing has changed. I'm working on it, Diana snapped. Griffin glanced at the judge. I have no more questions. Judge Turner turned her gaze to Sarah Miller, Diana's attorney. Miss Miller, your turn. Sarah stood up slowly, carefully smoothing the folds of her jacket. Thank you, Your Honor. She walked up to Robert Carter and looked him straight in the eye. Mr. Carter, you say you want to raise a son. But tell me, how often have you personally spent time with him since you found out that he is yours? Robert straightened a little. I tried to see him whenever possible. Do you have specific numbers? How many hours a week did you spend with him? Robert was silent for a moment. I work, so it was difficult. So you were not an active part of his life. Miller paused to let his words hang in the air. And now you want to take him away from his mother, who has been with him since birth. Robert clenched his jaw. I want to give him a better life. But are you ready to leave him to be raised by your mother or sister while you work by yourself? Don't you think that a child needs a mother, especially at this age? Robert looked away but said nothing. Judge Turner calmly tapped her pen on the table. Good. Both sides expressed their positions. Next, we will consider the closing arguments. Chapter 6. The Judge's Verdict. The courtroom froze in anticipation. Judge Alice Turner slowly took off her glasses, placed them on the table, and ran her hand over the papers of the case, going over the last notes. She understood how important this decision was. It will determine the future of a little boy who could not yet protect his own interests. And although both sides had their strong arguments, she was guided by only one principle: the interests of the child. After a few moments of silence, she lifted her head and looked first at Robert Carter, then at Diana Brooks. There was tension in both of their faces. He was tense, his lips pressed into a thin line. She was ready to fight to the end, although her eyes showed fear of the possibility of losing her son. The court carefully listened to the arguments of both sides. She began in an even voice. The plaintiff, Mr. Carter, has financial stability, secured housing, and the ability to provide the child with comfortable conditions. His home and surroundings are objectively safer for the child than the defendant's current place of residence. Robert lifted his chin slightly. Diana clenched her fists, but did not interrupt. On the other hand, the defendant, Miss Brooks, is the only person this child has known since birth. She was with him from day one, taking care of him, providing for his basic needs. The court cannot ignore the importance of maternal attachment, especially at such an early age. Robert sighed, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. The court also takes into account the fact that Michael is an infant. At this age, the primary role of the mother is crucial for his emotional and psychological well-being. Although Miss Brooks' living conditions are far from ideal, she has a real plan to improve them. The court believes that separation from the mother will now have more negative consequences for the child than the possible risks associated with living conditions. Diana exhaled and closed her eyes, as if not believing what she heard. Thus, continued Judge Turner, Mr. Carter's claim for custody of the child is with him. Deviates. In return, Miss Brooks' counterclaim is granted. Michael Brooks' residence is determined with his mother. There was dead silence in the hall. Diana covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back tears. Robert, although he looked restrained, could not hide his disappointment. He ran a hand over his face, trying to control himself. The judge tapped her pencil on the table before making her final comment. At the same time, Mr. Carter, you have every right to maintain a relationship with the child. The court strongly recommends that you communicate regularly with your son so that he knows that he has a father. Over time, when Michael grows up, new circumstances may arise that will allow you to reconsider this decision. But at the moment, there is no reason to change the place of residence. Robert nodded curtly, though there was hidden resentment burning in his eyes. This decision is final, concluded the judge. The meeting is declared closed. The sound of a hammer hit sounded in the hall. Chapter 7. The Final Word. Diana still sat motionless, as if she was afraid that if she moved, the court decision would disappear, dissolve like a mirage in the desert. She could feel her heart beating so hard it felt like it was going to jump out of her chest. Her fingers were still gripping the edges of the table, though her hands were already shaking. She won. Her son stayed with her. Slowly glancing over at Robert, she saw his jaw clench. His eyes were full of disappointment, but he didn't make a sudden move, didn't say a word. It was a defeat, but not the end. He stood up, straightened his shoulders, and turned to his lawyer. "Will we file an appeal?" he asked dryly. Richard Griffin sighed and carefully gathered the papers. "So far there is no sense," he answered. The court made a clear statement. Michael is too young to be separated from his mother. If you want to fight for him, you have to wait. After a few years, it will be possible to go to court again. Robert nodded, his gaze turning cold, almost calculating. He wasn't going to give up. He will not give up his son. Even if he lost now, it still didn't mean he would give in forever. Diana finally let out a breath, allowing herself to relax. She stood up, and for the first time during the whole court process, looked directly into the eyes of the man who tried to take her son away from her. "I don't want to fight you, Robert," she said quietly but firmly. "Michael is not a toy that can be won or lost. He is a child who needs both a mother and a father. I never forbade you to see him." Robert stared at her suspiciously, as if assessing the sincerity of her words. Then he sighed and turned to the judge, who was still sitting at the table, watching them both. "I will visit him," he said firmly. "I want to participate in his life." Judge Turner nodded. "That's your right, Mr. Carter." The court recommends that both parties act in the best interests of the child. Any changes in the future could be grounds for a new lawsuit, but the case is now closed. Robert looked at Diana once more, then turned sharply and walked out of the courtroom. Diana remained standing, slowly catching her breath. She still had a lot to do. Find a new home, provide Michael with a better future. But today she won the battle, and for now her son stayed with her. That was the main thing. And what do you think? Was the judge's verdict fair? Write your thoughts in the comments below the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next crazier thing.